Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Philip Ely, and on behalf of the Children, Youth, and Families at Risk Professional Development and Technical Assistance Center, thank you for joining our webinar. We're pleased to provide another wonderful webinar today. But before we begin, there are a few administrative announcements I would like to make. A recording of today's webinar will be posted on the SciFar PDTA Center's website at scifar.org. During the presentation, we ask that if you feel free to conversate and have things that happen in the chat for discussions. But if you have a question for our panelists, we ask that you specifically use the Q&A feature. That way we can make sure that we are seeing those and that we can address those. At the conclusion of today's webinar, you'll see a feedback form. We ask that you fill those out because that lets us know exactly what we need to be doing in order to help provide information for you all. Now, without further ado, I'd like to present our presenters for today. So today we have with us Dr. Jill Lark and Olivia Michael, who work with the University of Washington School's Mental Health Assessment, Research and Training, SMART Center. The mission of the SMART Center is to promote high quality, cultural responsive programs, practices, and policies to meet the full range of social, emotional, and behavioral needs of students in both general and special educational contexts. They also have vast areas of research, and one of those areas is program recruitment. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Jill and Olivia.
Thanks, Philip. So I will just start. I know Olivia's going to share her screen and run the slides for us, but we're just so grateful to be here today. Thank you so much for coming. We are going to be talking about navigating school-based research recruitment, specific strategies that our team has used and have been, I think, quite successful with, but also provide some post-pandemic insights and strategies for effective partnerships to make with schools. And so the next slide is, I will just say a little bit about me. I think Philip already gave an overview, but I am an associate professor here at the University of Washington in the Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences Department. And my program of research is all about implementing evidence-based practices or supports in public schools in the K-12 system, mostly around supporting autistic students in whatever placement they are in, but also thinking around some broader implementation supports for school level and district level implementation efforts. And Olivia, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jill. My name's Olivia Michael. I'm the research study coordinator for two of Jill's projects, and I'm really interested in studying the implementation of autism evidence-based practices in schools. And I have a special interest in figuring out recruitment strategies for long-term and sustained partnerships with schools. So really excited to talk with you all today about that.
Thanks, Olivia. So we wanted to provide a little bit of context for where our recruitment strategies and engagement strategies come from. So we currently have 4 federally funded studies. They're on the screen here, but I'll tell you a little bit about each of them. So you'll have an understanding of the types of schools, the types of educators and students and caregivers that we're recruiting into our studies. So the first one is ASD Prep. It's our observational mixed method study that's looking at evidence-based practice use among K-5 general education, special education teachers, and paraeducators, and what strategies and supports they use to help include and retain autistic students in their least restrictive environment. Our Ruby study is looking at the research units and behavior intervention for educational settings program. So it's an evidence-based intervention that supports educators in learning about supporting challenging behaviors with autistic students. I put that in quotes because we know behavior is just a form of communication. So really understanding what tools we can put into the school system in the K-5 elementary setting for use with autistic students who may be engaging in some behaviors that might interfere with their daily functioning. The other 2 projects on the right, one is the Autism Intervention Research Network on Behavioral Health. That's in partnership with UCLA, UC Davis, Kansas, the University of North Carolina, the University of Pennsylvania, the University of Rochester, and Drexel, and the University of Washington. And we're looking at implementation supports across service settings, across the K to 22, I guess I should say birth to 22 age span. So there's early intervention that our team is not involved with, but then there's an elementary school recess program that our team is involved with, and a middle school and high school program that we're implementing as well. And we're trying to understand the supports that schools need to be able to use these evidence-based practices. And then the last study, which is our Act Smart study, Olivia's going to have to help me with the acronym for that one, but I think adoption of curricular supports toolkit for systematic measurement. I'm messing it up, but essentially it's a selection quality adoption decision toolkit where we work with middle schools and high schools on understanding the evidence behind these different evidence-based programs and supports, to really help schools make a thoughtful, intentional, and systematic decision around if they should choose this practice or not. So we go through funding, and we go through timing and resources and supports and materials and all of that before we figure out if we're going to choose a practice or not. So this is the context for which we're talking about our recruitment for today. So I just wanted to name that all for you because we have a highly specialized population that we're working with. So if you go to the next slide, so who we recruit, I kind of mentioned this. It's all K-12 right now, all public schools. We don't work in any private settings. We've been all over the US and in Canada. So there's some states listed here. There's many more that couldn't fit on the slide. But we are going to talk about recruitment for these broad roles. So educators, again, teachers in both gen ed and special ed, paraeducators as well, administrators at both the building level and the district level, students, mostly autistic students, and their caregivers, and again, across those grade spans. So we want to learn a little bit about you, and Olivia has a fun poll that she's going to pull up, and hopefully you all can scan or I think it's the link or a QR code. I don't know. There it is.
Yes, it's going to be a QR code that you can either scan, or I'll go ahead. Oh, Philip beat me to it, but here's the Menti link as well. So this is a Mentimeter poll that you all can respond to, and let us know where you're coming from and where you're recruiting so that we can keep that in mind as we present the rest of the slides. So if you go ahead and scan either this QR code on the slide here, or use that link that we popped in the chat, you should be able to respond to our poll, and then your responses will pop up here. Ohio, awesome. First response. Alabama, great. And if you're having any trouble using the Mentimeter poll, awesome, look at all those. Feel free to also send it in the chat. We have middle school, statewide, schools.
Oklahoma.
Great. Oklahoma. Awesome. I'll leave it open for a little bit longer. Looks like we have 8 responses. Great. Middle schoolers, middle school, awesome. High schoolers, we have a study with middle and high schoolers as well. So this is great to see. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Okay, looks like we have 17 responses. So I think that's mostly everyone in the webinar. And we have one more question for you all. And that is, who are your recruitment targets? And it looks like we have a few people who already responded. So thank you so much for that. So volunteers from Florida 4-H, Elizabethtown, Kentucky, and then high school age students from historically underserved and minoritized communities in Milwaukee. Wonderful. I'll give a few more moments for people to respond. Perfect. Middle schoolers from their families, middle schoolers and their families and guardians. Awesome.
This is great. Thank you so much for taking the poll. And this is helpful context for us as we go through these strategies today. We're hoping to kind of leave you with some tools, but also some helpful tips that have worked for our team in the research projects that I named as well. And I should have said this, but our AirB project is only focused on Title I and rural public schools. And so we're really interested in those populations as well. So this is awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing real quick and pull our slides back up. Perfect.
So as Olivia is doing that, I think we're going to be talking and pivoting about some of providing an overview today. So our objectives of today would be providing an overview of the importance of school-based recruitment, and talking about actionable strategies that we use for both recruitment and engagement in case any of your projects have long-term involvement or longitudinal data that you need. And then we're hoping to share some templates that our team has used, as well as tools and examples. And you'll see that little tool icon in the slides as well whenever we're naming a tool. So we'll give a little background, which I'll do in just a second, and then I'll pass it over to Olivia for some more recruitment engagement. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to be focused on our school-based kind of research projects and what we've learned along the way. Can go to the next slide, Olivia. But essentially, we know that school-based research has been cited as a really powerful tool for improving educational practices and outcomes, and it really allows for the identification and dissemination of evidence-based approaches that can foster both stronger partnerships between researchers and educators, but also kind of bridge that research to practice gap. So in recent years, we're really trying to be mindful that there have been more calls and increasing calls for the translation of research into real world settings. So no longer testing things in the university or in the clinic-based settings, but bringing things out into the real world and into the community. And for researchers to more actively engage schools as one of those potential settings in that research process. And so what that hope is, these public academic partnerships, is to really begin to close that research to practice gap, because what we often know in research isn't always translated into practice. Next slide, please. And so that could be challenging because we know recruitment is challenging enough, but recruitment in the community settings in public schools is even more challenging. And that's often compounded by all of these other logistical considerations that we have to make around school recruitment. So that includes timeline considerations for the calendar year. It's shortened. We get 9 months in a school, but oftentimes that's less because of all the winter breaks and holiday breaks and report card conferences, you name it. Also, our study timelines might not align with the school calendar and or the IRB approval timelines if there are districts that also have their own institutional review board as well. There's just a lot of things that come up with the timeline. But we also know that there are school policies and pressures and resource constraints that also interfere with recruitment. So in particular, for your school policies and pressures, your research project or your project that you're working on may not align with their priorities or with their needs. And so having that conversation early is really important, but also understanding the contextual constraints in which you're operating. So the schools might have contract hours that are limited. They might have union restrictions that prevent participation in research, et cetera. So understanding all of that context is really important. And then of recent years, I think with the pandemic and continuing on through now, there have been a lot of difficulties with resources. So not just about stuff going into the buildings, but difficulties with educator retention at all levels, paras, teachers, admin, district admin, et cetera. The funding has been cut even further, and there's really limited time to engage in new initiatives. So that's also something to consider. So we've pivoted a lot. Sorry, next slide, Olivia. We've pivoted a lot during the pandemic in terms of learning that there's been additional challenges to school-based research. So there's that loss of instructional time when schools were closed, but also just the changing systems that we've seen in the schools that we've worked with across the US and in Canada. There's been increased absenteeism across all levels, from students all the way up to educators and admin. And then we've really had to pivot and shift to very virtual recruitment methods, which is what we're going to talk a lot about today. And I'll pass that over to Olivia.
Great. Thank you so much, Jill. So as we mentioned previously in the broad intro to what we're going to talk about today, we have slides prepared for you on talking about recruiting educators specifically, which is what I'll hop into next, and then students and caregivers, and then some tips and strategies for engagement in general with our school partners. And Like Jill said, a big focus for us has been virtual recruitment and the shifts and pivots that we've made in terms of contacting educators over email or using platforms such as Zoom and Teams to really connect with our school partners. And one thing I want to mention before I jump in is that a lot of this is anecdotal from our work on our studies and hasn't yet been empirically tested, but we really want to start the conversation about what researchers are using to recruit and engage schools because we think that's such an important part of the process. And I have tools throughout the presentation that I have the links for so you can engage with them after the presentation. So I'll send all of those links at the very end. So don't worry if you can't catch it quite when I'm presenting it, it'll be sent to you. Great. So to start off, the first thing that we think about when creating a recruitment strategy is developing our recruitment lists. And a lot of you, as we saw from the poll, are already thinking about who your recruitment targets are going to be, the states that you're working in, the grades of students that you're trying to engage, the educator populations that are involved in your recruitment. And this is also, again, kind of written into your grants and a really big part of your recruitment focus from the very beginning. But one thing that we think about is how do we take this information about who we want to recruit and turn it into comprehensive recruitment lists that are really intentional about targeting those folks that we want to include in our studies. And so our team has used this wonderful free web-based tool developed by Elizabeth Tipton over at Northwestern University and some of her colleagues. It's called the Generalizer. Again, the link is here and I'll provide it after. But it's a tool that helps researchers define inference populations using geographic, demographic, administrative criteria from sources such as the Common Core of Data, American Community Survey, and integrated post-secondary data systems. And so it takes a lot of those considerations that we've already talked about in that previous poll, such as the grades, school size, free and reduced lunch classification, urbanicity, race and ethnicity distributions of the folks that you want to work with, as well as the student educator population, and turns it into a beautiful recruitment strategy for you to choose from and to know who to strategically contact. So I want to show you what this platform looks like. As I mentioned, here's the grade distribution, so you can select who you would like to include in your recruitment list, as well as some of the characteristics. So here's the urbanicity characteristic that's defined here. And these are just two examples, but you go through all of those different characteristics that you've outlined and start to incorporate this into a recruitment strategy. And what the Generalizer does is it takes all of these predetermined considerations that you've decided, and it creates a stratified recruitment plan for you that splits all of these different potential participants into smaller groups that have specific recruitment targets within each group. And the Generalizer is really wonderful because not only does it provide you with the specific schools that match within those specific criteria, it provides a ranked list on who best matches that and contact information such as phone numbers so you can reach out to them. It also provides some thoughts on potential recruitment goals that you could have to meet and achieve your criteria for those inference populations, and a guide on how you could do that. Although I will say that they do primarily provide phone numbers, so we'll talk a little bit more about how to incorporate other emails or contact methods. Okay, so once you've defined your recruitment targets and have a well-crafted recruitment list planned out, the next thing that I mentioned is gathering those emails that will really help to fill out your recruitment plan. So on our team, we've harvested publicly available data to create our final list of invitees to our different studies. And we, when we're initially developing these methods, found it a little bit challenging to know where to look to find contact information and emails to reach out to schools. So we wanted to share a little bit about where we've looked and found success looking. The first place is state databases. And so in Washington, we have the Office of Public Instruction, and we know other states have things such as the Department of Education, which often have principal or administration email lists that you can use to fill out your recruitment strategy. If you're looking for specific teachers or positions, you can always use the school website to find, for example, for our studies, we really recruit special education teachers a lot of the time. So we'll maybe go look for a special education teacher email or phone number. And then the National Center for Education Statistics has really great enrollment information about schools that we've used for every state to fill out some of that demographic information that's really important, not only before the recruitment process, but when you do recruit to report in those study outcomes. And some questions to consider when developing these different recruitment lists is, are the emails that you've harvested from the current school year? So a lot of times this information might be out of date. So you really have to think if you are contacting the updated information, the updated educators who are interested in participating. Does the district or school have restrictions on contact? So always checking those school websites to make sure that the specific school or district doesn't have their own institutional review policies. And if they do, contacting them before you reach out to individual educators or principals to make sure that you're approved in their district. And then once you have your strategic list of potential participants that you want to reach out to, all of the contact information included in these lists, we then need to think about crafting emails that educators will really want to engage with and disseminating these intentionally. And so from our studies, we've noticed that some emails get much higher responses than others. And we wanted to see why that was and how we could craft emails that were very engaging and would result in higher response rates. So we did a little bit of user testing on our end, but then also looked into marketing research and came up with this STAR email template, which I'll go into more detail and talk about each of these letters in STAR. And I will mention too, before I proceed, that it's important to check with your IRB policies to see what's an option for your emails, and always review how you're planning to reach out to educators. But the first element of a STAR email is crafting emails that are short and simple. So I think a lot of times it can be tempting to try to make our emails really long and include a lot of information about the study. But what we found is it's really important to remain concise and focus on the deliverables. So whatever the next step is for educators, whether that's completing an interest form or setting up a time for a study meeting, really pointing the focus to that deliverable and setting a deadline to meet that deliverable. And then some feedback that we've gotten from our partners when crafting these emails is simplifying language. A lot of times, again, it's tempting to include research jargon or the ways that we typically communicate about our projects, but turning it into language that's easily understandable and matches with the potential participants that you're reaching out to. And then personalizing emails and adding names and titles. So one of the great benefits of creating those really comprehensive recruitment lists that we just talked about is you have the names and the positions of the people that you're reaching out to, and you can craft a really personalized email that fits with the educator's needs. And then timing. Jill talked about this a little bit already, but there are already challenges with the 9-month school calendar. You have a reduced timeline to reach out to folks. But then on top of that, thinking about school holidays and breaks when educators won't be looking at their inbox or even engaged in school activities, first and last days of school, standardized testing days, and IEP deadlines specifically for us, thinking about working with autistic students and their educators. There are really some of those days where educators will have increased demands on their time and might not be interested in considering research at that time or reading your recruitment email. And then there are other days, such as parent-teacher conference periods or professional development days, that you can really think about aligning your recruitment methods and engagement with the schools. So for example, if you're trying to recruit parents through teachers, you could suggest meeting with those parents during conference periods to talk about the research if there's time for that, or talking with administrators at the school about what professional development time they have set aside already and how you might be able to utilize some of that time for the study. And then aesthetic, this might be something that you all are thinking of, but creating really easy to understand study flyers, animations, GIFs to not only capture attention of the people who are receiving your recruitment emails, but reduce the cognitive load of reading a really long email. Our team has also developed short Powtoon videos, which explain the study recruitment guidelines so that we don't have to write that all out in the email, but we just say, watch this quick 30-second video so that you can learn more about the study. And then we've also found that including smaller graphics such as emojis in the email subject headline helps to capture engagement, capture attention, and results in sometimes higher click rates on your emails. And then reminders. It's of course possible that educators won't see that first email that you send out, but you also don't want to overload educators with a lot of emails about the same study. And so what we've found is that including refreshed language in all of your reminders can help to maybe make your emails feel a little less repetitive, and also shortening them even more to the extent that you can in those reminder emails. We've also found that including prompts like, are you interested in participating in the email towards the top is a great way to start conversations and maybe have educators email you back or engage with you as opposed to just sending the same email again. And then I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but providing an opt-out link or a way for a low barrier to entry way for educators to stop receiving your emails or be removed from recruitment lists so that we're not, again, burdening them with a lot of emails that they're not interested in. So here's an example of one of our study emails. As you can see, we have an emoji in the header. We personalize the email based on those recruitment lists. We add the requirements for educators in a clearly bolded way, as well as incentives. And we draw attention to the action item and the next step, which is filling out that interest form with highlighting, and then also providing that opt-out link. And as you'll see here, the tool that we want to highlight here is Qualtrics, which is a widely used survey management tool. And I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with it for developing surveys and developing interest forms that you send out to participants. But one thing that we've found really useful on the Qualtrics platform is the opportunity to develop personalized emails through their dictionary feature. So you can create a dictionary of all of the people that you would like to contact and then embed their name into the emails or other important information, such as potentially the student that they're working with or the caregiver's name. And then Qualtrics also allows you to track responses and schedule out reminders. So a great way that our team automates a lot of this process is that we will send out that initial email and then schedule out our 3 reminders so we don't have to keep going back to these emails. We just have that initial sending and then the rest is automated and we track that on our recruitment plan. And then of course, like I mentioned before, Qualtrics requires you to offer an opt-out link and it tracks all that data for you. So it's a really easy way to provide that low barrier to entry for educators to remove themselves from your study communications. And then here's an example of our study overview that we've included in a lot of our recruitment emails. As you can see, instead of including a big chunk of text about our study overview, we have simple language, icons and graphics, and a visual description of the requirements of the study so that it's maybe a little bit easier to understand and takes a little bit less cognitive effort to read through. And then, of course, we underline all of the important study elements that we recommend educators be aware of before they start participation. And the tool that we use to create things like this is called Canva. And maybe you're also familiar with this, but it's a really user-friendly graphic design platform that has pre-made templates that researchers can use. So for example, they have study timelines and they have recruitment flyers that you can then drag and drop in your specific elements that you want to include for your study. They also have QR functionalities, which I'll talk about later, which is really great for distributing flyers and allowing people to scan in and access your interest form in different ways. And then Canva is really easy to share your design among teams. So we've had multiple of our research coordinators be able to edit and share flyers and copy them for other projects. So it's a great way to do that. and is also free unless you want to upgrade to a really high icon usage or get all of the premium features. And then we already talked about this a little bit, but interest forums are a great way to allow your participants to express their interest in the study and connect researchers with the people who are who qualify and are interested in being a part of this. So we use Qualtrics, and we've embedded survey logic so that if a person is not eligible, they're easily screened out, and we have a trigger set up to automate the process so that once they screen out, they receive an email from our team that says, thank you so much for your interest in completing the interest form. However, you don't qualify. So they're not left waiting for an email from us and know immediately that they won't be able to be a part of the study. And this is a great thing to include on, like I mentioned before, your flyers, posters, emails, social media posts, so people can easily engage with you instead of having to type out a full email about their interest. This has also been a really great way, especially with virtual recruitment, to screen for spam. We've gotten a few people who are spammers, and when you have this interest form that's built into Qualtrics, there are safeties put in place so that you're easily able to identify people who aren't actual participants but are trying to get into the study. Interest forms are also a great way to track your recruitment and how successful it's going throughout the year, which was actually the reason why we kind of started thinking about this. We saw that this is the data from our ASD prep study and the interest forms that we received over the 2022 to 2023 school year. We started to see that there were really big and drastic changes throughout the school calendar in our responses to our interest forms, and that we could be strategic about the way that we set up our recruitment campaigns to align with some of these ebbs and flows of the school calendar. So as you can see in September and October, there's just a huge jump as the school year starts in interest forms. People are really excited about participating, but there's a big drop in November and December as teachers are busy closing off their testing for the year and going on holiday. But then things jump back up again in January and February and kind of flow back down as the school year ends. So we use this to then this year, 2023 to 2024, have really intentional recruitment campaigns and schedule out a recruitment plan in ways that aligned with the natural ebbs and flows of the school calendar. In addition to this, we looked at our interest form responses and the days of the week that were the highest last year. So again, this is the 2022 to 2023 data. You can see that Wednesdays and Thursdays, the middle of the week, was really popular for educators. And so we wanted to then schedule out our recruitment plan for this year so that they received reminders on Wednesdays and Thursdays when they might be more likely or more available to respond to these emails. And then even within that, thinking about what time of the day to schedule out your responses, we found that a lot of educators were highly responsive in mornings and afternoons, and actually received some emails from educators letting us know that they would prefer to receive emails in the mornings before they start their day, so that they have time to complete interest forms or surveys during break or prep times, and that it kind of just helped to promote that. So we've used this to not only think about when we're going to send out our recruitment strategies and plan for reminders, but also to accommodate educator schedules and make sure that our recruitment fits best with what they're hoping for. All right, so now I'm going to jump into talking a little bit about recruiting parents and students. And so this can also add an additional barrier because unlike educators, you're likely not able to find contact information for parents. You might not be able to have emails, and there might be some struggles with finding that information regardless. So we've had to find other methods of reaching out to parents beyond just cold emailing or relying on databases of parent contact information. So we have some tips around that we want to share. One platform that we've used over the past year that's been really successful is called Peach Jar. So this is a digital flyer distribution platform that engages a wide range of educators, schools, and districts. You can see this is directly from their website down here, but they have over 12 million parents that are a part of their platform. 17.5K schools and 900 plus school districts across the United States, which is wonderful. And essentially how this works is researchers can upload a digital flyer and then select the districts and schools that they'd like to distribute their flyer to. And so we've distributed our flyer throughout the course of the school year to districts specifically all across Washington and received a lot of parent interest that way. I will say that PeachJar does cost money to distribute your flyers on, but some of the benefits of the PeachJar platform is that it's really streamlined, really easy to use, and it provides a report on every distribution that you do, on the number of deliveries of your flyer, impressions and views. So people who have looked at your flyer or engaged with any of the links on your flyer, and then actions. So people who've clicked on your interest form and filled it out. And this has also been a great tool for us to see and target our recruitment in the future based on which districts were really receptive to our flyers and which maybe didn't click as much. And then also how they were engaging with our flyers. So if we see that a lot of people are viewing our flyer, but then not clicking on the interest form, that's a great sign that maybe we need to reorganize our structure or highlight the next steps a little bit more. And so this has been a great way to just to learn more about how we can organize that part of the recruitment process. And then social media has also been a great way for us to reach out to caregivers. So we've used platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, which is now called X, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And a lot of this has been done over just cold emailing these organizations that often host content on these social media platforms. I will say, of course, that if you're posting on social media, that needs to be something that's approved by your IRB and within your university's guidelines. But for us, for example, we've found a lot of success reaching out to organizations such as parent interest groups or nonprofits that are related to autism and asking them to share our flyer as well as a little bit about our study. And then anyone who's following them, such as parents or districts, is able to then share it among their network. And some advice for reaching out to organizations, since we've done this a lot, is in your email or direct message, just providing a clear introduction of who you are and why the study is important, an overview of the university that you're working in, and the call to action. So what interested folks can do if they would like to get involved, such as completing the interest form or emailing the study team. And a big piece of advice here is before you message an organization to ask them to post about your study, making sure that the materials that you're sharing them work on that platform. So for example, we have tried to post on Facebook, but if you don't test to see if your flyer looks good on Facebook before, sometimes it's tough to convince organizations to post it. So doing a test to see if your flyer looks good when it's formatted in a Facebook post. And then also a lot of these platforms have limits on the captions that you can use. So typing out a caption that's already social media friendly, that people can engage with and fits with the needs of that organization is a great way to build buy-in and hopefully make them more likely to consider your request. So here's an example of our parent-facing flyer from our ASD prep study. I will say this is a very busy flyer, and we've talked about kind of cutting down some of the wording on here, but we wanted to show it to you as an example. So again, we have simple terms on this flyer. We acknowledge confidentiality and the de-identification of student level data, which is really important, something that a lot of caregivers have questions about for us. We provide information about incentives and what participation will look like. We bold important elements and include visuals. And then that QR code that I talked about earlier, if this parent flyer is being posted on platforms such as PeachJar, which will show up on kind of a virtual bulletin board or in someone's email that they're viewing on a computer, they can easily scan the QR code with their phone and then complete the interest form there. But of course, we also include a hyperlinked link here so that they can visit the interest form that way as well. And we've also had a big request from a lot of our caregivers to include our flyer in multiple languages. So here you can see it's the exact same flyer, but just translated into Spanish. So I think it's really important too to survey the caregivers and educators that you're working with to see what kind of languages would be helpful to translate your materials into. And then one tip that we have for engaging with caregivers is working through educators. So educators and caregivers likely have already a pre-built relationship. There's likely some trust there, and they might have an additional advantage in building buy-in for the study if the educator is encouraging the caregiver to participate. So what we've done in our studies is provided educators with templated emails that they can easily distribute to parents that they think would benefit from participation in their classroom, and the students that are kiddos to those caregivers and parents. So we provide those templated emails along with the PDFs from the study, any flyers that would be helpful for the parents to see, and often, again, we'll adapt those flyers to be specifically parent-facing. And then sometimes we'll work with educators to align this parent-educator relationship within the class structure. So for example, like we mentioned before, if they're having a parent-teacher conference, asking them to potentially talk to the parents during that time, or if they're more easily reached over a phone call, brainstorming ways that they can easily engage with the parents. All right, moving on to our last section, which is engagement strategies. One thing that we've been thinking about as a team is that often there's a lot of work done up front to really think about your methods for recruiting and getting schools involved in your studies, but that's kind of where the planning ends in a lot of cases. And we wanted to think about how you can keep motivation throughout the study, build long-term partnership, and also just ensure that schools feel supported throughout the duration of your study, and really feel like you are there to be their research partner from the study and beyond. So we talked about this a little bit in the very beginning of the presentation, but the Institute of Educational Sciences, or IES, recently they published a report called Practical Strategies for Recruiting Districts and Schools. And it's been a really great resource to think about how we develop engagement strategies and how we ensure that our studies and recruitment and engagement requirements are really aligned with the goals of the district. So some practical ways to do this is from the very beginning, communicating the study's goals and objectives, and doing your background research to see what the district's goals and objectives are for their students and how these things might align. Because likely there is some alignment, but it's really being clear about and communicating about what that alignment is to build buy-in and really support that collaboration. And then some other practical strategies that we use is integrating the study into existing practices. So like we mentioned, communicating about those professional development days or needs and gaps in professional development that your study might be able to fit. And then offering flexible data collection and timing, depending on what kind of structures are already built into the school and what kind of student engagement there is. So this is from that IES report that I was talking about. They've developed a list of questions that I think are really great to ask school partners when you're thinking about engagement. So these are potential things that you could ask at the very beginning of the recruitment process or throughout the engagement process to see how you can better align your study with student and educator needs and combat a lot of the challenges that schools might face throughout the research process. And one thing that we like to think about is that if there is an alignment between the school and your research goals, then it's likely that retention in the study will be low because it'll be hard to mesh those two worlds. And so we really want to think about being intentional with that from the very beginning, but then also checking in throughout the study to make sure that things are still aligned and that research is really matching up with educator, student, and caregiver expectations. And one way that we do this a little more broadly is not only checking in with our school partners, but having advisory boards to consult on the study design decisions. And our advisory boards, especially for our research, which is primarily autism focused, is made up of people from diverse ages, identities, and roles. So we have autistic self-advocates, parents, caregivers, as well as educators from both special education and general education, and administrators who potentially make up our advisory boards and provide us with feedback on our materials, our research process, and ensure from their lived experience that it aligns with what educators, students, and caregivers would want in their research experience. And then one general tip for engagement that our team has thought a lot about is communication. So we really want to emphasize with all of our school partners throughout the research process that we want to cater to the way that they would like to communicate and the way that is most flexible to them. So at the start of the study, if you recruit similar to us, you probably met over email, but that's maybe not necessarily the way that they prefer to communicate. So intentionally asking, is there an easier way for us to chat throughout the rest of the study, whether that might be text or phone calls, or scheduling a quick Zoom call, whatever fits with their specific communication preferences. And then on the team level, also checking in to see what structures the school already has in place for these virtual meetings. So some of our school partners really love using Zoom, but others never use it. So it's hard for them to log on to a Zoom call because Zoom is constantly updating and they prefer to use Google Meets or Teams. So having those explicit conversations can help to build that engagement and ensure that your research is really aligned with the school's needs. And then throughout the study, creating a collaborative and communicative environment. One way that we do this is using Calendly, which is a scheduling tool, and it also has a free plan that you can use. But Calendly links with your calendar so that what you can do is just distribute a link to all of your potential collaborators or stakeholders within the school, and they can pick a time on your calendar to meet. So if they really need a quick 20-minute meeting, they can log onto your Calendly link and find a time that works best for them. And then Calendly will put a meeting on your schedule. So as research coordinators, we found this is a really great way to coordinate a lot of busy schedules with our school partners and with our research team and find a time that works for everyone in a mostly automated way. And then after the study, checking in with participants, sending study updates, and offering gratitude throughout that research process. And I have some visual examples of this. So this is a intervention study report. It's been kind of anonymized for template purposes, but this is a great way to communicate with your study partners that you worked with over the past year, or maybe it was a briefer interaction than that, and show some of the amazing things that you've accomplished. So we like to include our study and intervention name, and then include things that are relevant to educators that they might be really excited to hear about. So the numbers of schools that participated and where they participated in the state, you can see we added little tiny flags to show where they were, the number of students that were served, and the number of educators that were enrolled. And then educator outcomes. So these might not be the primary outcomes of the study, but they're things that might be really important to educators, such as the certificates that you awarded that year, the number of clock hours earned by educators, the number of coaching sessions held. This really helps to show kind of the impact that your study had and what the school partners did to really contribute to that. And then, as always, an open door to communicate with us and to ask us questions. We always include our study email or other contact information on this sort of feedback report. And then just a general show of gratitude throughout the research process we found has been really effective in maintaining that engagement with school partners. So here's an example of one graphic that we've sent to school teams. So it includes, of course, a little bit of gratitude in terms of just general thanking them for being a part of the study. And then we can also include more information about some of the study outcomes, as well as an open door to contact us again. And we'll always include either a picture or a university-specific logo, or in our case this year during Thanksgiving holiday, we sent out a progress update with kind of themed that time of the year information. So that can also be great if there are specific times during the school year that you want to show gratitude, such as the beginning of the school year, the end of the school year, or relevant holidays that might be great for you to reach out to partners. And with that, I know that we have 10 minutes left and I want to give time for questions. And I just want to thank you all for your time today. I feel so lucky that we have the space to talk about recruitment strategies with you all. And I want to thank our amazing team of other research coordinators and research assistants who have worked on all of these strategies with us. This wouldn't be possible without them. And I will send in the chat our emails as well as all of these tools so you have those, but I'll stop sharing screen so that you can see us all.
And if you have any questions, feel free to either put them in the chat, Q&A, or you can raise your hand and I'll give you speaking permission so that you can just ask those questions directly. And as people are probably thinking of things, I did want to ask one question, and you may or may not know this. But within Qualtrics, you were talking about setting automatic reminders. Is it possible to set up in Qualtrics that if somebody responds to one of those reminders, that they don't receive the other reminders that are already set up?
Yes, that is possible. So if they receive a reminder, they can use that opt-out link. And as soon as they hit opt-out, they'll be unsubscribed from the email list, so they won't receive the next reminders. There are also manual ways that you can go into your dictionary in Qualtrics and unsubscribe participants. So if you get an email from them that says, I no longer want to be a part of this recruitment list, the research team can go in and unsubscribe them if they choose not to use the opt-out link. So there are a few ways that you can do that in Qualtrics.
Another question that I had is when we were looking at the recruitment and you showed different areas for you all that September and February and the days of the week. Now, was that just for educators, or did that include family members as well and parents and other participants?
That's a great question. So that was just for our educator interest forums. We haven't looked at our distribution for caregiver interest forms, but we should definitely do that. But that was just for our educator interest forms. And yeah, I will say that that was just for our 2022 to 2023 school year. So I think it will be beneficial to include more years of interest forms as well as from different studies. But that one was just our educators.
And just pausing for a quick minute, see if there's any other questions out there. If not, then I just want to remind everybody on the call that our Sci-Fi Professional Development event is going to be going on June 11th through 12th. So please go ahead and go to the website and you'll see all the information you need to register for both the room block and the register for the event itself. And again, I just want to say thank you to all of you all for being here today for this webinar. And especially thank you to Dr. Lark and Olivia for being here and presenting. It was a wonderful and a lot of great tools and resources. I know this is something that has often been mentioned by a lot of our sci-fi grantees, just talking about recruitment and trying to get out that little rut. And I think a lot of the tools that you brought up today will be very useful. So again, thank you so very much to you two for the presentation today. And thank you to all you all. This will be posted after a couple of days, and we'll have this posted on the website so you can come back and review it again. And also don't forget to fill out our quick survey that will pop up at the end of the webinar. Thank you, and we will see you all next time.